In a small, quiet town, Emily lived a life of tradition, surrounded by a conservative family with rigid values. She was the golden child, obedient, graceful, and poised to follow the path her parents laid out for her. But Emily had a secret that could shatter their perfect image of her husband, Marcus. Marcus was a charming, kind-hearted black man she met during her college years. Their love blossomed in secret, hidden from her family's judgmental eyes. Emily knew her parents would never accept Marcus, so she kept their marriage a secret for years. Even after they built a life together filled with love and trust, Marcus respected her decision, though it pained him to stay in the shadows. He understood the weight of her family's expectations and never pushed her to reveal their relationship. They lived in a modest home far from her hometown, where Emily could avoid the inevitable confrontation. But as the years passed, guilt began to eat at her. She wanted her family to know the man who made her so happy, yet fear held her back. Then, tragedy struck. Emily was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and her time was running out. As she lay in the hospital bed, her family gathered around her, unaware of the man who had been her rock for over a decade. Marcus stood silently in the background, watching the family mourn, his heart heavy with the secret they still shared. Little did they know, Marcus was about to make a decision that would change everything at Emily's deathbed, leaving her family in utter shock. As the morning sun filtered through the hospital blinds, Emily's family filled the room with a tense silence. Her mother, Margaret, sat closest to the bed, clutching her daughter's hand, tears streaming down her face. Her father, Robert, stood stoically by the window, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. Aunt Clara and Uncle James whispered prayers, while Cousin Sarah paced nervously, unsure of how to process the impending loss. The room buzzed with unspoken grief, but no one noticed the stranger lingering near the door, Marcus, dressed in a simple gray sweater, his eyes fixed on Emily. Emily's breathing grew shallow, and the monitors beeped rhythmically, a stark reminder of her fading life. Margaret turned to the family, her voice breaking as she spoke of Emily's perfect life, her education, her career, her adherence to family values. Yet, there was a hollow ring to her words, a missing piece no one could name. Marcus clenched his fists, the weight of their ignorance pressing down on him. He had promised Emily he'd stay silent, but seeing her family mourn without knowing the truth tore at his soul. A nurse entered, adjusting Emily's fore, and the family's attention briefly shifted. Marcus seized the moment, stepping closer to the bed. Emily's eyes fluttered open, locking onto his. A faint smile crossed her lips, and she whispered his name, too softly for the others to hear. The family turned, startled by the unfamiliar voice. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she noticed Marcus for the first time. "Who are you?" she demanded, her tone sharp. Marcus hesitated, glancing at Emily, who gave a slight nod. The air thickened with anticipation as he prepared to unveil the secret that would unravel their world, setting the stage for an unforgettable revelation at her deathbed. The room fell silent as Marcus stood beside Emily's bed, his presence a stark contrast to the pale hospital walls. Margaret's question hung in the air like a storm cloud, "Who are you?" And all eyes turned to him. Emily's weak hand reached for his, a silent plea for courage. Marcus took a deep breath, his voice steady despite the tremor in his heart. "I'm Marcus," he said, "Emily's husband." The words landed like a thunderclap, shattering the family's composed facade. Gasps filled the room, and Robert's face flushed with anger. "Husband? That's impossible," he barked, stepping forward. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she nodded faintly, confirming Marcus's claim. For years, she had shielded her family from this truth, fearing their rejection. She had envisioned a life where she could reconcile her love for Marcus with her family's approval, but that dream never materialized. Now, with death looming, the secret could no longer be contained. Margaret clutched her chest, disbelief etching lines into her face. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Marcus met her gaze, his own eyes glistening. "She wanted to protect you, all of you, from the judgment she knew you'd feel. The family exchanged stunned glances, their minds racing to process the revelation. Aunt Clara crossed her arms, muttering about propriety, while Sarah stared at Marcus, curiosity battling her shock. The monitors beeped on, a relentless reminder of Emily's fragile state. Marcus squeezed her hand, whispering words of love only she could hear. Then, as the family grappled with their emotions, Emily's voice, frail but clear, cut through the tension. "He's my heart," she said, her gaze locked on Marcus. The room stilled, and all eyes turned to him, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold at her deathbed, a moment that would leave them forever changed. The revelation of Marcus as Emily's husband sent shockwaves through the room, fracturing the family's unity. Margaret's face contorted with a mix of betrayal and confusion, her hands trembling as she pointed at Marcus. "You're saying my daughter kept this from us for years? How could she do this?" she demanded, her voice rising. Robert stepped forward, his eyes blazing with fury. "This is a disgrace." Emily would never, but Sarah interrupted, her tone softer. "Dad, stop. She's dying. Let her speak." The room fell into an uneasy silence, the weight of Sarah's words grounding them momentarily. Emily's breaths were labored, but her eyes shone with resolve. "I loved him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was afraid of losing you all." Marcus held her hand tighter, his own heart breaking as he watched her struggle. He turned to the family, his voice calm but firm. "Emily wanted to tell you, but she knew your traditions wouldn't accept me. She didn't want to lose you, or me." The words stung, forcing the family to confront their own biases. Aunt Clara shook her head, muttering, "This isn't right," while Uncle James remained silent, his expression unreadable. Margaret's anger gave way to tears, and she sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "Why now?" she asked, her voice raw. Marcus glanced at Emily, who nodded weakly. "Because I couldn't let her leave this world without you knowing the truth," he said. The family stood divided, some grappling with guilt, others with resentment. The tension was palpable, but Emily's fading strength demanded their attention. As Marcus leaned down to kiss her forehead, a quiet determination settled over him. He knew what he had to do next, a final act at her deathbed that would leave the family reeling, forcing them to confront their deepest prejudices. Marcus felt the weight of the family stares as he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small bundle of envelopes tied with a ribbon. Emily's eyes softened with recognition, she knew what they were. The family watched, confused, as Marcus untied the bundle and held up the letters. "These are from Emily," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "She wrote them over the years, hoping one day you'd understand our love." The room stilled, the air heavy with anticipation. Margaret's hands shook as she took the first letter, her name scrawled in Emily's delicate handwriting. Robert hesitated, then accepted his, as did Sarah, Clara, and James. Each envelope held a piece of Emily's heart, words she couldn't say aloud during her life. Marcus explained, "She wrote these after every family gathering, every holiday she attended without me. She wanted you to know how much she loved you, but also how much she loved me." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she read her letter, her voice breaking as she whispered, "She says she wished she could have brought Marcus to my wedding." Margaret's letter revealed Emily's fear of rejection, her longing for acceptance, and her deep love for Marcus, the man who gave her strength. Robert's letter was an apology, Emily begging for forgiveness for hiding the truth. The family sat in stunned silence, each grappling with the raw honesty of her words. Marcus watched them, his heart pounding. This was only the beginning of what he had planned. The letters were a bridge, a way to soften their hearts before he revealed his final act, a gesture so profound that it would force them to see him not as an outsider, but as the man who loved Emily more than life itself, forever altering their perception at her deathbed. The hospital room was thick with emotion as the family absorbed the letter's revelations. Tears streaked Margaret's face as she clutched Emily's letter, her earlier anger dissolving into sorrow. Robert stood by the window, his shoulders slumped, the weight of his daughter's hidden pain sinking in. Sarah held her letter to her chest, her eyes meeting Marcus's with a newfound understanding. The letters had cracked the family's defenses, but Marcus knew the hardest part was yet to come. Emily's breathing grew shallower, and the beeping of the monitors intensified the urgency of the moment. Marcus knelt beside Emily, taking her hand in his. "I promised her I'd do this," he said softly, his voice carrying across the room. The family turned, their curiosity piqued. He reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a simple gold band, identical to the one he wore. "This is our wedding ring," he explained. "We married in secret 10 years ago. I promised Emily that if she ever left me, I'd make sure her family knew our love was real." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over them. Then, with a trembling hand, Marcus slipped the ring onto Emily's finger, a final act of devotion. "I'm not just her husband," he said, looking at the family. "I'm the father of her child, our son, James, who's waiting outside." Gasps erupted as the full scope of Emily's secret life unfolded. Margaret covered her mouth, tears falling freely, while Robert's face paled. The revelation of a grandson they never knew rocked them to their core. Marcus's act at her deathbed was a bold declaration, forcing the family to confront their prejudices and embrace the legacy Emily left behind, setting the stage for an emotional reckoning. The hospital room seemed to shrink as Marcus's words echoed, a son, a grandson, a piece of Emily the family never knew existed. Margaret's hands dropped to her lap, her eyes wide with shock. "A child?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Robert turned from the window, his face a mix of disbelief and guilt. Sarah stepped forward, her voice soft but urgent. "Where is he, Marcus? Please, let us see him." The family's emotions were a tangled mess, grief for Emily, shock at the revelation, and a flicker of hope for a new connection. Marcus nodded, his own eyes glistening with tears. He stepped outside briefly, returning with a small boy clinging to his hand. James was 7, with Emily's blonde curls and Marcus's warm brown eyes, a living testament to their love. The boy looked at the strangers nervously, clutching a stuffed bear. Marcus knelt beside him, whispering, "It's okay, buddy. These are Mommy's family." James's gaze darted to Emily on the bed, and he whispered, "Is Mommy sleeping?" The innocence of his question broke the room's tension, and Margaret let out a choked sob. Sarah was the first to approach, crouching down to James's level. "Hi, James," she said gently, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your Aunt Sarah." The boy hesitated, then offered a shy smile, sensing her kindness. Margaret followed, her steps tentative as she reached out to touch James's cheek. "He looks just like her," she murmured, her voice cracking. Robert remained frozen, grappling with the reality of his own prejudice. Marcus watched the family's reactions, his heart heavy yet hopeful. This child was Emily's final gift, a chance for healing, but the true test of their acceptance was still to come. As Marcus prepared for the next step in honoring Emily's legacy at her deathbed, the hospital room buzzed with a fragile new energy as James stood among his newfound family. Margaret knelt beside him, her fingers tracing his curls as tears fell freely. "My grandson," she whispered, the words a balm to her wounded heart. Sarah held his hand, whispering stories of Emily's childhood, while Uncle James offered a hesitant smile, his earlier judgment fading. Robert, however, remained by the window, his back to the scene, wrestling with a lifetime of ingrained beliefs. The air was thick with unspoken apologies and tentative reconciliations, all sparked by the child who bridged their divide. Marcus watched, his heart swelling with a mix of relief and sorrow. Emily's eyes fluttered open, catching the sight of her son with her family. A faint smile crossed her lips, and she squeezed Marcus's hand weakly. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice a thread of sound. Marcus leaned close, whispering, "For you, always." The family turned, sensing the gravity of the moment. Margaret approached the bed, her face softened by tears. "Emily, I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "We failed you." Emily's nod was barely perceptible, but it carried a lifetime of forgiveness. As the family gathered closer, Marcus felt the time had come for his final act. He reached into his bag, pulling out a small photo album, pictures of Emily and Marcus's secret life, their wedding, James's first steps, and quiet moments of love. "These are for you," he said, handing it to Sarah. "To remember her as she was." The family flipped through the pages, their shock giving way to awe. But Marcus wasn't done. At Emily's deathbed, he prepared to make a promise that would bind them all, a vow that would shock them once more and seal Emily's legacy in their hearts forever. The hospital room grew quiet as the family absorbed the photo album's tender memories, each image a window into Emily's hidden life. James nestled against Sarah, his small hand clutching her sleeve, while Margaret traced a wedding photo with trembling fingers. Robert finally turned, his eyes red but softened, the album bridging the gap his pride had built. The monitors beeped steadily, a somber reminder of Emily's fading strength. Marcus stood beside her, his resolve hardening as he prepared for the final act she had entrusted to him. Emily's hand tightened slightly in his, a signal he recognized. He cleared his throat, drawing the family's attention. "Emily asked me to make a promise," he began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "She wanted our family, yours and mine, to be one. I vow to raise James with your love, to bring him here, to let him know his mother's roots." The room stilled, the weight of his words sinking in. Margaret gasped, tears streaming anew, while Sarah nodded, her expression a mix of sorrow and hope. Then Marcus knelt beside Emily, pulling a small necklace from his pocket, a locket with a photo of her and James inside. "This was hers," he said, placing it around James's neck. "She wanted you to have it, to carry her with you." As he fastened the clasp, Emily's breath hitched, her eyes locking with Marcus's. "I love you," she whispered, her voice fading. The family watched, stunned, as Marcus leaned down, kissing her forehead. In that moment, he whispered a final promise only she heard, a vow to forgive her family's past and unite them through James. As her eyes closed, the family was left reeling, the shock of his selfless act at her deathbed igniting a new beginning. The hospital room was cloaked in silence as Emily took her final breath, the monitors flatlining in a haunting, unbroken tone. Marcus held her hand, tears streaming down his face, while James clung to Sarah, sensing the loss. Margaret collapsed into Robert's arms, their shared grief a quiet reckoning of their past mistakes. The family stood united in their sorrow, the walls of prejudice crumbling under the weight of Emily's love and Marcus's unwavering devotion. The locket around James's neck gleamed softly, a symbol of her enduring presence. A nurse entered, gently disconnecting the machines, and the family stepped back, giving Marcus a moment alone with Emily. He whispered words of love, promising to honor her wishes, to raise James with the family she cherished. When he turned, the family approached, their faces etched with gratitude and remorse. Robert, his voice hoarse, spoke first. "Marcus, I was wrong. Your family now." The words were a balm, a bridge to healing, and Marcus nodded, a tearful smile breaking through his grief. They gathered around James, vowing to be part of his life, to share stories of Emily, and to embrace the love she'd fought to protect. The photo album lay open on the bed, a testament to her joy, and the locket became a cherished heirloom. Marcus's actions at her deathbed, revealing their son, sharing their story, and uniting the family, had shocked them into transformation. As they left the hospital, hand in hand with James, the family carried Emily's legacy forward, a legacy of love that transcended barriers. Marcus looked back one last time, whispering, "We did it, Emily," knowing her spirit would live on in the unity he'd forged, a final shock that turned grief into hope.